Hello there, and thank you for joining me for this edition of the Calvin Chronicles. This year marks 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre. In this video, we'll cover the events that led up to this tragedy, the aftermath, as well as the recovery. Make sure that you watch till the end because I'll have some additional information for you, including some documentaries that are being released just this week. If this is your first time to the channel, or if you've forgotten to do so, consider subscribing so that you'll be notified as soon as new videos are released. When people think of domestic terrorism in the United States, most recall the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. At the time, many considered this to be the largest occurrence of domestic terrorism in the country. However, it was not even the worst occurrence in the state of Oklahoma. 7 decades earlier, the Greenwood District of Tulsa experienced nearly 18 hours of terror that claimed hundreds of lives, thousands of homes, and devastated an entire community. The Greenwood District in North Tulsa was founded in 1906 by black landowner O.W. Gurley. Gurley bought 40 acres and opened a grocery store and boarding house as his first businesses. Gurley partnered with black entrepreneur J.B. Stratford to plan residential and commercial zones within Greenwood. In part due to the Tulsa oil boom, the district quickly grew to become the most prosperous black community in the country during a time of strict segregation. The Greenwood District was home to approximately 11,000 black residents and hundreds of black-owned businesses, including dozens of doctors' and lawyers' offices, 2 theaters, multiple schools, and its own taxi service with a fleet of Model Ts. Due to the success of the community, educator, author, and black leader Booker T. Washington declared the district as the Black Wall Street of America. On May 30th, 1921, 19-year-old Dick Rowland, a Greenwood resident who shined shoes in downtown Tulsa, entered the elevator of the one downtown building that had a colored restroom on the upper floors of the Drexel building. It is not clear what happened in the elevator, but it is believed that Rowland accidentally bumped into or stepped on the foot of white elevator operator Sarah Page, who then screamed. Rowland ran away, fearful of what may happen. He was arrested the next day, May 31st, for assault and placed in the county jail on the top floor of the Tulsa County Courthouse. In the news and on the streets of Tulsa, the arrest was reported as being for a suspected sexual assault. An editorial printed in the Tulsa Tribune even called for the lynching of Rowland. That afternoon, a crowd of white citizens gathered at the courthouse, some of them armed. Some tried to reach Rowland on the upper level of the courthouse but were stopped by sheriff's deputies. Upon hearing this, concerned black citizens in Greenwood, many World War I veterans, armed themselves with guns and other weapons, then went to the courthouse to offer their help to protect Rowland. There was valid reason for this concern. In the 2 years leading up to this incident, there have been dozens of race riots against black communities across the country, beginning with what became known as the Red Summer of 1919. These incidents were sparked by things like competition for employment between European immigrants and blacks, or retaliation against black war veterans not willing to submit to the status quo of Jim Crow laws after returning home from war. During this same period, there were nearly 200 known lynchings of blacks across America, including Oklahoma. The county sheriff assured the Greenwood residents that Rowland would be protected and they went home, but the white crowd grew in size that night and residents from Greenwood returned. During this second encounter, a white citizen tried to take a weapon from a Greenwood resident. During this struggle, the weapon fired, leading to a shootout between the two groups. People on both sides were killed. This led groups of white citizens to attack Greenwood throughout the night, shooting residents on site and torching homes and businesses. Armed Greenwood citizens held off some attacks for a time, but were eventually outnumbered. Law enforcement was of no help to Greenwood residents. In fact, many white citizens were deputized. Blacks were captured and taken to makeshift detention centers. This left homes and property in Greenwood even less protected. Daylight on June 1st brought even more white citizens to Greenwood. Throughout the morning, more homes and businesses were looted and burned. Multiple witnesses reported planes dropping makeshift bombs onto buildings within the Greenwood district. In the late morning of June 1st, Oklahoma's governor declared martial law and sent the National Guard to Tulsa. White citizens were disarmed and sent home. Black citizens were rounded up and taken to the detention centers and remained there for days. Most historians estimate up to 300 blacks and 50 whites were killed. The exact number of deaths cannot be confirmed as funerals were banned and the National Guard buried many in mass graves. In testimony to a commission formed in 1997 to investigate the massacre, white Tulsa resident Clyde Eddy testified that as children, he and his cousin witnessed boxes with 4 to 5 bodies inside each. Also, many survivors left Tulsa immediately and never returned. 1921 reports from the Oklahoma Department of Vital Statistics lists 36 deaths, 26 black, 10 white. Property losses. Over 1,200 homes were destroyed. Approximately 300 businesses were lost. In total, 35 square blocks were destroyed. Greenwood was rebuilt, but it was not an easy task as there were numerous obstacles to rebuilding. While many in Greenwood were insured, no claims were paid even after lawsuits were filed against the insurance companies. $2.7 million in claims went unpaid. In current US dollars, this is close to $45 million. In the aftermath, Tulsa's leaders wished to convert the area to a new railroad station or an industrial zone. This would force blacks further north. In efforts to accomplish this, Fire Ordinance 2156 was passed strictly for the Greenwood district, with requirements designed to make it so expensive to rebuild that most would not be able to do so. Fortunately, lawyers who lived in Greenwood and now working in tents fought this ordinance and it was overturned by the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Nearly 24 churches were also destroyed. Mount Vernon AME Church sheltered Greenwood residents in the basement while the church above burned. Another church, Mount Zion Baptist, was completed 3 months before the destruction and carried a $50,000 mortgage. Rather than file for bankruptcy, the church paid off the mortgage by 1942 and it was completely rebuilt by 1952. No persons were tried for violence. Blacks held in detention centers had to wear green tags signed by their employers to be on the streets. With the help of the Red Cross and donations from across the country, Greenwood did rebuild and grew to be even stronger than before it was destroyed. The event was covered heavily in the days following, but since 1921, many factors led to this incident fading into history. Tulsa leaders, wanting to protect their image as an oil boom city, did not want to discuss and discourage people from doing so. White and black families did not discuss the massacre, either from fear of retaliation or embarrassment. While most newspapers archived copies of their issues, the Tulsa Tribune, the paper with the most inflammatory articles regarding Dick Rowland, cut out the worst articles before they were transferred to microfilm, and the original issues were destroyed. Also, this incident was not required history in Oklahoma until the 2020 school year. A combination of events brought attention back to the incident. Reporters in Oklahoma covering the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing learned of this event during their research. Also, the 75th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre was approaching in 1996, and there was a growing desire to capture survivors' stories while they were still living. These and other factors led to the creation of a state commission to study the Tulsa Race Massacre. Today, Greenwood is still a neighborhood. The name of the Gap Band actually derives from the first letter of the streets Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, bounding the neighborhood where the band members grew up. However, not much evidence of the once thriving business district remains. Greenwood was split by urban renewal and construction of Interstate 244. On one side of the interstate is Vernon AME Church. Beyond the church is now the campus of Oklahoma State University in Tulsa. The other side of the interstate is where many businesses used to be. If you look on the sidewalk along these 2 blocks of Greenwood Avenue, bronze markers the size of a brick or a dollar bill mark the businesses that were lost. More markers can be found on the sidewalks of Archer. In addition to the business names and address, each marker notes if the business was rebuilt. Approximately a third were not. When visiting Tulsa, just north of historic Route 66, there are a number of places where you can learn more about the historic Greenwood District and Black Wall Street. The Greenwood Cultural Center, located across the street from Vernon AME Church, was dedicated in 1995. Visitors can choose a self-tour or guided tour to learn more about the events of 1921. Visitors can also view other exhibits related to Black culture in the Greenwood District. Outside of the building is a memorial marker listing the names of the businesses that were destroyed. John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park opened in 2010. Franklin was a descendant of one of the survivors. Artwork within the park serves as a memorial to the Tulsa Massacre and shares African American contributions to Oklahoma's history. At the entrance to the park, called Hope Plaza, visitors are greeted by a 16-foot sculpture with 3 sections labeled Hostility, Humiliation, and Hope. Each section is based on actual photos from the massacre. Hostility shows an armed white man. Humiliation shows a black man surrendering. Hope shows a white Red Cross director holding a black baby. The Tower of Reconciliation is a 25-foot sculpture that represents history of African Americans in Oklahoma, including the Tulsa Massacre. The spiral-shaped sculpture chronicles initial journeys from Africa to America, migrations to Oklahoma, first along the Trail of Tears and later by migration of freedmen to the territory. African American military service in Oklahoma is also honored. Bronze plaques surrounding the tower provide additional information on this history. Both sculptures were created by artist Ed Dwight. Before he was known as a sculptor, Dwight was an Air Force test pilot and the first black candidate for astronaut training for NASA in 1962. Greenwood Rising is a new museum at the intersection of Greenwood Avenue and Archer Street. It is expected to open in June. The museum will use technology to offer an immersive educational experience on the earliest of black history in Oklahoma, including freedmen's communities, the rise of Greenwood's Black Wall Street, the Race Massacre, and the rebuilding of the district. If you are not able to visit Tulsa, the History Channel is releasing a documentary titled Tulsa Burning, the 1921 Race Massacre. It is scheduled to be released on May 30th. In the description of this video below, I've included more books and movies that provide additional information. If you have resources that you would like to share, please let me know in the comments below. I hope that you found this video informational. I appreciate you taking time to follow me on my journey to learn more about history, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.